Hello, I'm Jerry Olson. I'm the CEO of Olson Engineering. Started the company in 1968, and we have been continuously in business since then for 54 years. I always wanted to have my own business. My dad owned a sawmill, so I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Well, I got out of Oregon State in '63, and there was a recession going on then, so I took a job with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources, spent a year in Forks, went to Kelso, Vancouver, Large Mountain Honor Camp, and back to Vancouver as area engineer. 5 years later, I was living here in Vancouver, and finally settled on surveying because of all the aspects of my job the previous 5 years. I loved surveying. The technology when I started was basically transit and measuring tape. I had a drafting table in my kitchen. That was my office. The electronic distance measuring devices came out 2-3 years into business. Wang computers were invented, and it made having a desktop in your office. I made sure I invested right away in the current technology, so we had an advantage over our competitors in that. First big project I remember was Lake Merwin Campers Hideaway. We did a whole summer construction staking, redoing runways at Portland Airport. Corps of Engineers hired us to do cross sections for floodplains all over Washington County, and then we picked up the work for Clark County. My biggest love was working in the woods, doing original surveys, retracing the original surveyor. So we got to do a lot of work for Longview Fiber. We were their only surveyor for several years, working in the Columbia Gorge in Northwest Oregon. I think I designed the first subdivision called Lecton Meadows out on 78th Street, and then Kurt Stonex started designing, and it wasn't long before we hired an engineer and then another engineer, and it just kind of grew from there. We had good engineers working for us for a long time, still do. Surveyors do planning. It's from the very get-go, you do subdivision applications and that, so we've always been planners, or surveyors were planners, and then we had enough of that kind of work, we'd hire a dedicated individual to do the planning. First one wouldn't be necessarily iconic, but it was really unusual. We were just coming out of the severe recession of the early 80s in about 1987, and Walt Music came to us with a project to do a giant subdivision in a rock pit. Very early on in '72, we did a planned development called the Cedars, a golf course and development. We're still working on the Cedars project. Since then, we've done the Clark County Amphitheater. We did Legacy Hospital for 5 or 10 years now. Probably we've been the surveyor and engineer for the Cowlitz Casino. There are a lot of projects that were highlighted, but those are the ones that people might call iconic. There's been a lot of weird projects over the years. With the phone calls we get from people wanting to survey or having a problem on a survey, and it's just unusual phone calls. But the one that always stood out was the FBI called us up and wanted us to survey the location of the D.B. Cooper money. They had recently found it in the beach down along the Columbia River, and they needed to know the exact elevation and location of it. So we surveyed the D.B. Cooper money. Over the 54 years, I think I figured out I have somewhere around 400 employees have worked here at Olson. Hardworking, loyal, dedicated, it makes you almost embarrassed to think of how good a work that they would do. Same with clients. We learned early on, just a little catchphrase, that we'd identify clients for life. And they're the clients that keep coming back to you kind of no matter what. They trust your work, they have faith in your judgment, and they don't want anybody else but Olson Engineering to do their stuff. So we still have those, and I treasure and remember all of them. Very early on in the company, we decided what is our strategic plan, and we picked a simple statement, is we want to be in business 30 years from now doing the same thing we're doing now, only better, and we need to conduct ourselves in a manner that would facilitate that.